Colombia. When you think of it, what comes to mind? Probably emeralds, amazing coffee, some of the most beautiful, biodiverse landscapes on Earth. But just beneath that vibrant surface, there's this incredibly complex history of conflict. So how did a nation with so much going for it get caught up in one of the world's longest-running civil wars? Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack that exact question.
So yeah, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? How did this land of incredible contrasts, from the massive Andes Mountains to the sprawling Amazon jungle, become the stage for one of the most complicated and longest armed conflicts in the Western Hemisphere? Let's get into it.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to explore this story in 6 parts. We'll start with its ancient civilizations and challenging geography, then move through the Spanish conquest, a really turbulent independence, into a cycle of political violence, the rise of the drug trade, and finally where Colombia is today and its ongoing search for lasting peace.
To really understand Colombia, you have to start with its geography. It's key. The Andes Mountains don't just run through the country, they actually splinter into 3 huge mountain ranges. This carves the country up into these isolated valleys and really distinct regions. And this isn't just a fun fact for a geography quiz. It is the root of the country's powerful regional identities and the biggest challenge to creating a single unified nation. Now, let's jump in a time machine and rewind the clock way, way back, long before the Spanish ever showed up. This land was a crossroads of ancient peoples and home to some of the most sophisticated cultures in all of the Americas.
What's absolutely incredible here is just the sheer depth of history. I mean, we're talking about hunter-gatherers near modern-day Bogota 12,000 years ago. This region produced some of the oldest pottery ever found in the Americas. And by 800 AD, centuries before Columbus, the Tairona people were building a complex city up in the mountains. This was a thriving, ancient world. And these weren't just simple tribes, these were incredibly advanced societies. The Muisca had a political system that was nearly as complex as the Incas. The Tairona engineered these amazing cities on terraced mountainsides. And the Cambaya and Zanu, they were master goldsmiths, creating artifacts that honestly still blow our minds today. This place wasn't an empty wilderness. It was a land alive with culture and incredible innovation.
And all of that incredible wealth gave rise to one of history's most powerful legends, El Dorado, right? The lost city of gold. But here's the thing. It wasn't a city at all. It was a real Muisca ritual where a new leader, completely coated in gold dust, would offer treasures into Lake Guatavita. This one real ceremony sparked a myth that would ignite the greed of the Spanish and, well, change the fate of an entire continent. Okay, fast forward. 3 centuries of Spanish rule finally lead to this wave of independence movements all across South America. But for the land that would become Colombia, winning freedom from Spain, well, that turned out to be just the first chapter. The real battle, the internal one to figure out who they were as a nation, was just beginning. The initial dream was immense. Simón Bolívar's Gran Colombia was this vision of a massive united republic. But that vision just collapsed in a little over a decade, fractured by the exact same regional divisions that are still a factor today. What came next was a century of instability, civil wars, and even the loss of Panama in 1903. Forging a stable nation was proving to be a really bloody and difficult task. And right at the heart of this whole struggle was a fundamental political divide. Right from the start, there were 2 opposing camps. You had the conservatives, who were inspired by Bolívar, and they wanted a strong central government and a really close relationship with the Catholic Church. Then you had the liberals, who followed Francisco de Paula Santander. They championed more power for the regions, secularism, and more voting rights. This was not just some philosophical debate. This was the political fault line that would cause conflict for decades. So as we move into the 20th century, we see this political divide just explode into unbelievable violence. And kind of ironically, the very attempt to end all the bloodshed would end up sowing the seeds for a new, even more complex conflict down the road. The turn of the century brought the Thousand Days War, a brutal clash between liberals and conservatives that claimed around 100,000 lives. It was just a horrific preview of the kind of violence that was still to come. And then, just a few decades later, the conflict erupted again in a period known simply as La Violencia, the violence. The assassination of a popular liberal leader plunged the country into a decade of absolute chaos, leaving up to 300,000 people dead. The scale of it was just almost unimaginable.
So to finally end La Violencia, the two parties came up with this unprecedented power-sharing deal, the National Front. For 16 years, they would just alternate who got to be president and they'd split all the other government jobs. It was a pretty radical idea, all designed to just stop the bleeding. But this solution had a massive unintended consequence. By creating a closed two-party system, the National Front basically locked out any other political ideology. So if you were a communist or a socialist or had any other ideas, there was no longer a peaceful path to power for you. This pushed all that dissent underground, and it directly led to the creation of left-wing guerrilla groups. The peace treaty for one war became the catalyst for the next one. And that brings us to the modern era, where an already complicated conflict was about to have a powerful and very corrupting new fuel poured on it: the global cocaine trade. All of a sudden, the conflict became this multi-sided war. You had established left-wing guerrilla groups like the FARC and the ELN. You had the rise of unbelievably powerful and violent drug cartels like Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. In response to that, right-wing paramilitary groups like the AUC emerged to fight the guerrillas, and they were often financed by drug money themselves. And caught right in the middle of this crossfire was the Colombian state, battling a war on multiple fronts. The violence of the 80s and 90s was just brutal, from the shocking siege of the Palace of Justice to the car bombs at the Medellin cartel. But even in this really dark period, a path to peace started to emerge. A new, more inclusive constitution was written in 1991, the infamous drug lord Pablo Escobar was killed in 93, and finally, after decades of war and so many failed negotiations, the government signed a historic peace deal with the FARC, the country's largest guerrilla group, back in 2016. So, after this long and often tragic journey through history, where does Colombia stand today? A fragile peace has been achieved, for sure, but the story is far from over. When you step back and you look at the whole story, a clear theme just keeps popping up. From the collapse of Bolívar's Gran Colombia to the bitter political wars, from the rise of guerrillas to that 2016 peace accord, this has always been a nation struggling to unite its diverse and divided people under a single identity. And that work of unification is happening right now. The peace process is about way more than just disarmament. As this quote here points out, it's about confronting the past through special tribunals designed to investigate, clarify, prosecute, and punish the worst atrocities of the war. It's the slow, difficult, but absolutely essential process of healing. Which leaves us with the final and most crucial question. After more than 2 centuries of conflict, can Colombia finally build a peace that is not only lasting, but also inclusive enough to heal the deep historical and geographical wounds that have defined its story for so long? That is the question Colombia is trying to answer today. If you found this journey through history compelling, you should definitely check out our Quick Country Histories playlist. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Notebook Summaries for more deep dives into complex topics like this one.